back to the podcast. I'm doing a little late night session tonight, but I had something that I was just really getting stirred with today that I felt like, man, I really want to get this content out because I think it's so important right now based upon just what's happening right here in our country in America, but also this is hugely prevalent, especially in Europe and in Western civilization cultures. So you saw in my title, we're talking about the dirty secrets behind open borders. Like, why in the world do we have open borders? Why in the world would any government at all advocate for open borders? How does that benefit a culture? How does that benefit a country? And it doesn't at all, as a matter of fact. It's hugely destructive, okay? So we're going to talk about, like, why the previous administration, the Biden administration, had just straight up open borders, and why I think all across Europe right now there's a move to have open borders and to flood their countries with individuals from all across the world. But first, let me give you two stats really quickly, and we'll talk about that more here in a second. 300,000 and 500,000, all right? Think about that in terms of human trafficking, child slavery, and the cartels. And we're going to break this down here in a second. But first, I want to tell you, when you hear people talk about migration into America is a civil offense, it's not criminal, those people are just not telling you the truth. They actually don't know. They're either uninformed or they're lying. Let's see, that's the two options. United States Code 1325 specifically states individuals who come here into this country that are unauthorized, that have unauthorized entry, commits a misdemeanor. If it happens repetitiously, it can be bumped up to a felony. That is a crime. There's no mincing of the words. That is what it is. A civil penalty would be something like, running a red light or not stopping at a stop sign. All right? So just to make sure, if you're engaging in conversation and someone is telling you it's a civil penalty, it's a civil offense, no. United States Code 1325 specifically enumerates that it is a crime to come into this country without notifying our authorities, without getting permission. Okay, it is what it is. All right, one of the things I want to talk about, though, and I'm going to mention this before I get into the stats, is if you are entertaining what the news media is feeding you, specifically about what's going on in LA right now, or just with ICE specifically, Immigration Customs Enforcement, what they're telling you about them, what they're telling you about Donald Trump, they're telling you about Tom Homan, whose the borders are. Guys, it is a complete fabrication of the truth. And that's what they do. They fabricate, they manipulate, and they don't believe, they honestly think that we are too ignorant to fact check. Thankfully, with independent media and other people being able to get the news out and disseminate it at a very quick pace, the lies are being exposed. But let me just say something really quickly, and I mentioned this in my previous podcast. You cannot want laws to be selectively enforced because it somehow fits with your political ideology. It doesn't matter what the laws are. The laws have to be enforced. And so ICE, the Trump administration, they are mandated with enforcing the laws on the books, okay? And so it doesn't matter if you don't like the laws. That doesn't matter. You can't advocate to violate and obstruct them. Okay, it's just wrong. And I would ask you and encourage you to reflect and also think about this in terms of the sovereignty of a country. Why do you think there are millions and millions of people wanting to come to America? Well, because we're racist, because we're bigoted, because we're intolerant, because we somehow don't give opportunity? No, because all of those things are lies and not true. The fact is, America is the most benevolent, the most philanthropic, the most generous nation ever to exist. People are coming here because they want a better opportunity. And I don't blame them. As a matter of fact, I don't blame many of you if you were watching this and you're advocating for just unmitigated migration. Because honestly, you haven't been told the truth about it. You've been lied to. So hopefully some of you who are listening won't take offense to this, but you'll listen to some of the stats and you'll be willing to let me share with you some things that I've learned. Because I'm telling you, unmitigated migration, I don't care what country you are, if you allow it to happen, it is destructive. It is destabilizing, and it's unsustainable. And there's a reason for this, and we're going to talk about it here in a second. Okay, let's talk about the Biden administration. Okay, let me just say this. Remember when Joe Biden, who again wasn't running the country, it was the auto pen, there were other people running the country, he was just a figurehead, he was hot air, okay? I don't say that cruelly, I just say that matter-of-factly, that's what happened. So Joe Biden, they were blaming the Republicans in Congress. Oh, if Congress would only pass this bill and give us more money to enforce, to secure the border, to make sure the border's secure, we could make sure that all of these illegal entries would not happen. That was the message, right? That was the narrative they continually fomented. Well, guess what? 4 months into President Trump, right now, this is true. This is an actual stat that is not up for debate. He has secured the border at the tune of 99.9%. Unfathomable. So all it took was someone willing to enforce the law. So that right there is a lie. You were lied to by the previous administration. Think about how big of a lie that was. You had millions and millions of people flooding into this country. Terrorists, individuals who came and this is true, they would open up their prisons. This is not hyperbole. This actually happened. They would open up their prisons and flood this nation with people who did not want to be positive forces for good here in this country. As I said, there are plenty of people who come here because they want to better themselves. I'm not saying every single migrant who comes here illegally wants to do harm to the U.S. That's just not true. But we have millions of people who are doing the right thing, waiting in line, going through the process, and doing it the right way. All right, so let's talk about the stats really quickly. So just wanted to mention that and expose that lie because the border is secure, and we probably have the most secure border right now in the history of this country, and it was done in 4 months. All right, so let's look at some of the stats here. So during the Biden administration, 300 children were lost at the border. Think about that, just poof, gone. 300,000. You had 500,000 children who were smuggled in. Think about the open border advocates right now. Where were they? Why were they not talking about the 300,000 children who were lost at the border? There are the 500,000 children who were smuggled in. Let me just tell you this. The United States, I heard this, is the number one country for, I believe this to be true, okay, child sex slavery. Think about how twisted that is. Why would, and do you not think the Biden administration, of course they knew, they had intelligence, they knew exactly what the cartels were doing in Mexico, bringing these kids up, aiding and abetting human trafficking children at the southern border. So you have to ask yourself this question, and this is something I'm not going to dig into right now because it would take way too long, but hopefully we'll be able to flesh this out more in the coming days. Why would an administration who knew that 300,000 children, 500,000 children were being smuggled in and were lost, why would they not do something? When they had the power to do it. Trump did it in 4 months. It's unequivocal. He did that. So I ask open border advocates, those who care about the innocent, those who care about children, think about that. 800,000 lost, smuggled in. And Tom Home, where the borders are, said 9,000 of those children have been found. Now, some of those children, again, are with family members, okay? But there are plenty who've been human trafficked and who are in slavery, prostitution, all sorts of despicable things. And you had an administration who aided and embedded in that. Criminal, man. That's criminal. We'll talk about that more here in a second. All right, let's keep going. You had 250,000 fentanyl. 250,000, let me backtrack. 250,000 people died due to fentanyl during the Biden administration. 250,000. And the fentanyl, most of you probably are aware, is a drug that is extremely potent, that even a tiny trace amount can kill a human easily. Think about that. You have all sorts of chaos and carnage because of this drug that no one even knew about 10 or 15 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's become just in this even stems to China, who provides the ingredients, I believe, to Mexico, the cartels, who then begin to bring it across the southern border. Again, horrendous under the Biden administration. Let's keep going. You have 4,000 migrants. Think about this. 4,000 migrants died making their way to the southern border. Now, let me ask you this question. Those of you who are advocates of a lenient border policy, which basically what you're advocating for is not to enforce the law. You got to call a spade a spade. If you are anti-ICE, anti-enforcing our immigration codes, you are opposed to enforcing the law. That's just what it is. Sanctuary cities, mayors and sanctuary cities, you are opposed to enforcing the law. That's just what it is. You're lawless. You are lawless. Okay? There's no other way to describe it. So let me ask you, like, when you're advocating for open borders, when you're advocating for leniency, why aren't you talking about the children who are trafficked in as sex slaves? Why aren't you talking about women who were trafficked in as sex slaves? Why aren't you talking about the thousands of migrants who died making the trip to the southern border? Why are you talking about the people, and this is true too, you know what happens right now? The cartels who have so much power, people say the cartels actually run Mexico. Wouldn't be surprised. Like literally run their government. So the cartels who, when they traffic people in, let me just say this really quickly because I'm getting a lot of my information from a guy who is the epitome of excellency when it comes to information and disseminating the truth about what's going on. His name is Tom Homan, Homan. He's all over YouTube. Check him out. He's a dude who doesn't mess around, and he is like the quintessential Wyatt Earp of today. I mean, just an awesome dude who I respect highly. He talks about this, fleshes it out, really breaks it down, and he's phenomenal. So anyway, you have, when they go in, and they've actually found children and rescued children so far. I mean, what the Trump administration is doing is unbelievable. It's one of the greatest acts of mercy right now that's going on. They'll go and they'll find these children, okay, literally, or women who are under the control of the cartels. And what happens is they can't tell the authorities even what's going on, even though they're living in brutal, harsh conditions. Because why? Because the cartel literally will threaten them and say, if you say a word, then we're going to kill your family in Mexico or wherever else. That's the type of stuff going on right underneath our noses. And what aids and abets it is this despicable dereliction of duty of enforcing the border. And it's intentional, guys, and we're going to break this down in the final section about why that is. Let me just mention a few more things. The Biden administration, literally, there was 400 known terrorists. I mean, think about it, terrorists. We're talking about people who literally blow things up and want to kill and cause as much carnage as possible. 400 known terrorists in the Biden administration, okay? And literally, not one so far in the Trump administration. Not one known terrorists. 400 who got in this country, who may still be at large. What? And let me just say this, and this is something that's like tangentially related. I'm not going to break this down, but it's just people who have common sense can look at this and like kind of scratch your head, like, yeah, that does make sense. The same people who advocate for this destructive, atrocious policy of open borders are the same people who tell you that little girls should be able to sexually mutilate themselves and can become little boys without their parents' consent. They're the same people who advocate for foreign wars all over the world. They're the same people who tell you that if you get an abortion in the 9th month, it's totally okay. They have the exact same messaging. Okay, so I just want to leave that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail, but just understand they all have similar messaging. All right, so let me just talk a little bit about. We'll get back to some of these issues, and this is our last topic, and I'm going to break this down and talk a little bit about why is this? I mean, why do you think countries in Europe, America, specifically the previous administration, but a lot of these are progressive, very left immigration policies. Why do they not want to enforce the border? Why do they want open borders? Remember Hillary Clinton back in 2015 or 2014 said like her dream was to have open borders? That's consistent. This is a consistent messaging with these people. But why? What is the purpose? Well, a few things I'm going to submit to you. Okay, it's to replace native-born citizens. You have to understand something, guys. And this is not hyperbolic. This is I speak with conviction because I know this to be true. I just do. One of the greatest threats we have right now to our existence are the people who hate Western civilization. Western civilization is not perfect, okay? I get it. Colonialism, I get the things you can say were horrible. But you know what? Western civilization has provided the most freedom and the most prosperity to the most people in the history of the world. Rush Limbaugh said that fervently, and he said it repetitiously, and he said it accurately. We have given America, who's on the forefront, who's led in this reality. That's the truth. But what does Western civilization have? Western civilization is tied to a principle, a belief of a democratic republic, that those who govern only govern because of the consent of the governed. And so if you can begin destabilizing that infrastructure, if you can begin doing that, well, then what happens? You open up chaos. You open up chaos, and what do you welcome in? You welcome in draconian rule and laws to subjugate the people you rule. And the messaging is this. Oh, okay, and let me just backtrack. All of this open, unfettered, unmitigated migration leads to destabilizing civilizations. Then when it destabilizes, chaos ensues. And so then they create the problem. And I mentioned they. Let me just mention a few things because this is important. I mentioned this in my last podcast, but I'm going to mention it again. Who when I say they, okay, think about this. It's this group of people, okay, this collective elites out there who want power in the hands of a few people. They want this conglomeration of power, okay, a centralized power, okay, and think about it like this. You have the European Union, right? That's why when Britain left a few years ago, or they tried to leave with Brexit, there was like, you would have thought that World War III broke out just because they wanted to be independent from the European Union, okay? The European Union, we have the United Nations, we have the WHO, the World Health Organization, we have NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Do you think when Trump criticizes NATO, they're like, oh, he's criticizing our allies, how dare him? No. Anytime you criticize one of these conglomerations, okay, the World Economic Forum, okay, same thing. They want to create this epicenter of power without borders where they can control and subjugate people and tell them they're the purveyors of truth. They're the ones who want to give freedom when in reality, what they're giving and what they're wanting to lure us into is rendering our sovereignty as human beings, our God-given right to make decisions, to live under our own vine and fig, and to give them power. And I kid you not, guys, the people who are the greatest threat to our country right here are the enemies within. Same thing with Europe. Do you think that it's accidental that that all these people from different countries are being welcomed in many different European countries in our previous administration because somehow we wanted to be compassionate? These people, that is the biggest bunch of, excuse my language, BS. The people who are the strongest advocates for open borders, guys, are the people who live in Martha's Vineyard, or the people who live in their gated communities. Ask them how many migrants from Central America, how many migrants from the Congo, how many migrants from the Middle East, how many migrants from Eastern Europe are living in their community? How many migrants are going to the schools with their kids? It's the biggest lie. These people, again, they want control, they want power. And it's not just a Democrat thing, actually. There's plenty of people in the Uniparty. There are plenty of rhino Republicans who are too feckless because they want, I'm going to digress, but just know it's a Uniparty issue, although the Democrats have just embraced it hook, line, and sinker. Look, understand the severity of this, guys. And so it's not about not being compassionate. When someone tells you, if you are just a proponent of enforcing the law, oh, it's not compassionate. How dare you? What about caring for your brother and sister? Let me just tell you one thing. I don't care what country you're in. I don't care if you're in Argentina. I don't care if you're in the Congo. I don't care if you're in Kazakhstan. I don't care if you're in Siberia. I don't care if you're in Brazil. The country you live in, your first priority after your faithfulness to God and your family is to your country. and to the people who are living in your country. If you're not faithfully taking care of them, why is it that our uniparty, leftist, progressive politicians care more about people thousands of miles away than they do people living in their backyard? Because it's not about caring at all. It's about optics, and it's about, again, trying to usher in a systematic change and an eradication of Western culture, Western values, and freedom. That is the truth. And I'm sick of it. Now, I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm not going to be hateful, because God doesn't want us to operate in hate. But I will say this. Be unapologetic. Speak the truth in love. And sometimes speaking the truth in love is going to hurt a little bit. It's going to offend a little bit. I don't go out to try to offend, but this current crisis right now, and I praise God that President Trump has the backbone, that Tom Homan has the backbone to do something about it. So I encourage you, man, whatever part you have to play, whatever part God has for you. And I mentioned the illegal immigration debate because it is such a significant issue that if you look at previous countries all throughout the world, this has been an issue that has caused havoc, wreaked havoc, and caused chronic problems. I think that's all I got, guys. I'm gonna bounce to bed because I'm getting a little tired and my throat is starting to sound really dry. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll be back soon. Have a blessed Thursday. Talk to you later.